Hi, hi, hi. It's so nice to see everyone again virtually. You're on, as you know, Music and Chat with Shirley Ong, and it's a good morning from me to you, and I am in Singapore indeed. Please say hi in the live chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. And as you know, you shouldn't be backward and coming forward, as they say in Australia. Remember to put any questions you may have in this live chat so that I may attend to them as the stream moves along. You know how this works. Again, I want to say hi to everyone out there. I know some of you are busy working. I just saw a little message in the live chat from my good friend Tom Brislin. Hi, Tom. Good to see you again. And of course, our dear friend Gary Mariulo, who's an archivist for this live stream podcast, Music and Chat with Shirley Ong. Gary's always there attending to any issues that we have from the other side of the stream. So good to see everyone. I hope everyone is safe and sound from the elements out there. I hear there have been some weather-related damages, and I am concerned that my friends are safe. So if you have a moment to let me know in the live chat or let us know that you're A-okay in the live chat, please do so. But otherwise, stay well. So it's now 9:36 a.m. in Singapore, and I believe it's 9:36 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So let's get on with the stream. Today's topic is the Nashville Number System, an often misunderstood but powerful method of notating chord progressions. And I shall refer to the Nashville Number System as simply NNS. Uses digits to represent scale degrees 1 to 7 on which chords are built. Similar to the basso continuo practiced during the Baroque era, where a bass instrument and a chordal one improvised harmonies based on figures written below or above the bass line. So NNS, this shorthand system, has several benefits. It's especially handy for musicians who hop from gig to gig without rehearsal because the song structure is always made apparent. And it's based on a movable do concept, so the solfege do. If a singer is unable to hit those high notes and requests a lower key, the player can immediately transpose the song without requiring new charts. So that's why it's really popular in the industry out there. But our guests will tell you more about it because they're expert users. I am just a novice, and I'll just give you the basics to start off with before they jump in with their knowledge. So just a quick history, but our guests will have more history, I'm sure. NNS was first developed by a studio musician, Neal Matthews Jr., in the late 50s for vocal group The Jordanaires. And it's so simple to pick up, even my students know how to use it. And the basics go like this. So give me a second now. So here's my quick little chart so that you can see how things work, at least the basics. Again, this is just the basics upon which other add-ons are added on. And there are variations on the theme too, which our guests will also talk about. So I want to speed through this so we have as much time for our guests as possible. Right, so speeding through this, a typical NNS chart will always give you the key. Of course, as I said, it is possible that a singer or the music director or producer, someone conducting the band or so on and so forth, might say, this is the key the song was written in, but can you please transpose it to blah, blah, blah. So you always get the key, the time signature. That's already two clues. The time tells you how many beats in a bar you have. Then you have the BPM, so you know how fast or how slow the piece is going to be. And finally, you have a style indicator, if you're so lucky to get a style indicator. So you have an idea how the beats will fall. Is it syncopated or is it straight? That kind of thing. So, and then you have to begin with, I got a four bar line that I will repeat because it will use different kind of indications as to beat and so on and so forth. So a typical 4-bar line would look like this: 1, 4, 6, and 5, and they indicate the degrees of the scale that the chords are built on. And I'll play this for you quickly, so you can see my hands, which will be removed from my head. That's because I have a different camera on the keyboard, but the idea would be like this: 1, 4, 6, and 5. And you'll notice that there's a little minor sign next to the 6 that indicates a minor chord. Okay. And speaking of minor chords, music theorists out there know that chords built on the 2nd, 3rd, and 6th degrees of a major scale are minor in quality, and songwriters know how to take advantage of this natural tendency for one chord quality to lead to another when they build a song. So other basics in NNS include this. It's called a split. Splits are whole bars split into 2 even durations, and they're notated with what I call bracket and a comma. I think there are other ways of mentioning what a bracket is. I'm not quite sure in America what we use, but I was brought up using the word bracket. Bracket and comma, or it could be a comma with an underline under the 2 chords. So this would sound like this. Alright, so it's an even division. The next one is extra beat divisions, which are indicated by the lines above the actual notes. And you can see above C, the minor 6 chord, you have 3 strokes, which indicate that there'll be 3 beats for the minor 6 chord, or the minor 6 chord, and 1 beat above the chord built on the 5th degree, and it should go like this. And finally, the last basic I'm going to share with you, again, I'll leave the rest to the experts, is this. If you have a bass note that's different from the chord itself, you indicate it like a fraction. The bass note forms the lower part of the fraction, aka the denominator, I guess, if you're dealing with math. And that will go like this. Oops, sorry. I'm still reading the line above. Okay. So a last thing I want to say about NNS is that it's primarily designed for and functions best when applied to songs in major keys. When a song is in a minor key, it's typically transcribed relative to its major counterpart. I know some of our guests might have something to say about that, but I want to give you an example in case you're confused about what I just said. So let's say we have a song in A minor, that would be notated as a C major piece, because C major is the relative major of A minor for our music theorists out there. And chords built on A and E, which would be 1 and 5 in A minor, would be written as 6 and 3 in C major, but as minor chords, following the standard music theory concept of chords built on the 2nd, 3rd, and 6th degrees of a major scale. Okay, that's my waffling part. I want to take us to the next section. I hope I didn't use up too much time. Very good. The time is smiling at me. It's saying I'm doing well. So I want to now introduce our guests, or more like they will introduce themselves. So here are our panel of guests for you. Applause. Thank you everyone for being here. I would love for you to introduce yourselves, because who better to introduce yourselves but yourself? And we shall start with the top row, Gary, and then Neal, Tim, PC, Ryan. Let's start with Gary, please. Thank you, Gary.
Okay, I'm Gary Talley. I've been a musician since 1965. professional since '67. I started out in Memphis, and my band, the Box Tops, had some big hits in 1967. The Letter, and then Cry Like a Baby in '68, and then Soul Deep in '69. And so I went from being in that band to writing songs and being a sideman and eventually a studio musician in Memphis, Atlanta, and I moved to Nashville in '81, and I've done recording sessions in London and in LA and New York, but Memphis, Atlanta, and Nashville are the main places that I've worked in the studio.
Thanks, Gary. Neal.
Hi, my name is Neal Merrick Blackwood. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, born and raised there. Worked there most of my life. I've been working in the studios as a producer, engineer, composer, arranger, and musician during that time for a lot of different people, including Cyndi Lauper, Randy Travis, under Kyle Lanning, and a lot of different people. And my family's the Blackwoods, the Blackwood gospel family. And so I've been doing this a long time. That's my story in a nutshell.
Neal is a very humble person. He's got heaps of work under his belt, but he's very soft-spoken. Thank you, Neal. And we have Tim.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Lorsch. I was raised in New York and Philadelphia. I've lived in Nashville now for 30 years. I started off playing violin classically. I moved to Montana and chasing trout fishing and started playing fiddle. And here in Nashville, for the most part, I mean, I've played with famous people, but I've mostly, just been kind of a working class musician here, done tons of demos for songwriters, a lot of people you haven't heard of, a lot of Americana records and things like that. I picked up mandolin along the way, and eventually I kind of learned to play cello, and so I kind of do a lot of string parts for people, just kind of one-man things. And the last few years I've been doing a lot of looping, using Ableton, and kind of have a solo act playing violin, octave violin, and cello, and I have a one-man multimedia piece about my family history and the Holocaust. But yeah, I've done a lot of varied things, and I still am. You know what I mean? My wife thought when I retired that I'd sell everything, but 50 years later, I'm still looking for gigs, So if you got one, I'm ready. It doesn't change, I'll tell you. The fire never goes out.
I like that a lot. I've been asked, when I thought I might retire. I'm thinking, I don't think as a musician we ever retire.
Yeah, no.
Thank you, Tim. PC.
Prince Charles Alexander, you can call me PC. And I am currently a professor of music production and engineering at Berklee College of Music. I started off as a woodwind player. At the time when I put out my first record, drum machines were becoming a big thing. So I had to understand them, and I couldn't understand them, so I went and studied audio engineering. So I began as a producer and then eventually went and studied audio engineering. And through that part of my career as a producer and audio engineer, I worked with people like Mike Stern in jazz, Luther Vandross in R&B, Charlie Puth in pop music, Notorious B.I.G. in rap and hip hop, and Donnie McClurkin in gospel music. And the ability for me to apply any kind of music has varied depending upon who I've worked with. So hopefully we'll be able to discuss that today.
Thanks a lot, PC. Finally, Ryan.
Hey, my name is Ryan Tilby. Nice to meet you. PC, I hope for a brief stint, I got to play some jazz guitar in college, studied at Berklee, and I didn't realize you were the Mr. PC from the old jazz standard. So that's a relief. I grew up in bluegrass music, became a multi-instrumentalist, guitar, banjo, mandolin, dobro, had a good long run. Almost 20 years as an independent musician, spent 10 of those years on the road with a group signed to Capitol Records. Then my good looks started to fail me and got into education and filled in some gaps that I needed to on that front, and I am now teaching music technology, recording, and songwriting at Purdue University here in Indiana.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, everyone, for your introductions and your humor. Keep them coming, please. So with that said, let's find out a bit more about each of our guests as insofar as their use of NNS is concerned, because that's what we're here for. And I did ask them initially for answers to a few questions, or at least to prepare answers to a few questions, such as their area of work in the industry, which they've already mentioned. But I'd like to know how or when they discovered NNS and when they started using it. Do they use NNS in combination with traditional or alternate scoring? Any examples of their scores to help us understand their use? So we shall begin with Gary, because Gary sent me plenty of charts to look at, for us to look at. And Gary, at 19, you were saying you became lead guitarist of the Box Tops, and a couple of years later, in '68, you were recording at the American Sound Studios in Memphis when you were introduced to NNS. Could you please tell us how that happened, how you and your band reacted to being introduced to NNS, and whether there was resistance in adopting it, or confusion, or perhaps like, enthusiasm?
Well, probably a little bit of all of that stuff. I was 19 years old. I was just a kid who had been playing guitar for a few years. I had no music training, just played by ear, and my parents both played by ear too. So I didn't know anything about music theory. I could play a lot of songs, and but when I got in the studio with these guys at American Sound Studios in Memphis, and they played on over 200 top 10 songs in the space of about 3 years. Just Son of a Preacher Man, Dusty Springfield, Elvis, Memphis Soul Stew by King Curtis, Herbie Mann's Memphis Underground, all kinds of records. And these same guys played on all of them. So they were my heroes, and they were legends to me. So the first time I was in a session with them, there was a singer that came in with a song, and he sat down at the piano and played the song, and everybody, all the musicians, got a little notepad, and as he played the song, they wrote down numbers. And I thought, wow, that is so cool. And they were using the number system. They had learned it from the guys in Nashville who discovered it in the early 60s or invented it. And after the session, they explained to me how it worked. And I thought, well, that is great. It is just so, it's very song oriented. It is not scale oriented, because as you know, for instance, okay, here's a song that was recorded in Memphis in 1967. Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, starts in G. The next song is a B. Now, according to the scale, that should be a B minor if it was a diatonic chord, but it isn't. It's a major. So it starts on a G major, goes to a B major, to a C major, which is the 4 chord, back down to the 2 chord, which is another major.
Gary,
So
we
they're
can't
not-
hear your guitar. I'm assuming you're playing something because I see your fingers.
Oh,
moving.
okay. Well,
It's
I
the
don't
mic.
know.
There's a gate. There's a gate suppressing the guitar.
There may be a setting somewhere on the mic.
Yeah, there's a setting in the
Audio
in the Zoom,
settings.
yeah.
Use spatial. I don't know if this is going to work. If I play,
Gary, just get rid of that anti-suck button that you have in there, and then we can hear you, buddy. I'm telling you.
anyway, so it goes from a G major to a B major, C
Major.
major, A major. So if they were diatonic chords in the key of G, that B would be a B minor. But in the number system, it's just a 3. The G, it's in the key of G. So G is 1, B is 3, C is 4, and A is 2. They're all major chords. Now, if they were minor chords, you would notate it. You would say 3 minor or 2 minor. So in the number system, the big difference is everything is major unless you say it's not.
You know, you were
So-
saying that you weren't classically trained initially, you played by ear. So,
Yeah.
but you're very, very eloquently spouting classical terms. So when did you pick up your classical part of your knowledge?
I learned it later. I started, you know, it's odd. I played in the song that had a #1 record in the country, and I was still learning how to play. I learned, and I taught myself as I went along. I would buy music theory books and talk to people who knew music theory and there were no online classes, but I would buy the books. And often I would be with keyboard players or horn players or people who had formal music training, and I would learn from them. And so I'm self-taught when it comes. I don't have a formal music education. When it comes to music theory, I'm pretty much self-taught. But I learned to play by ear. The people that I looked up to, many of them didn't have a musical education either, a formal education, and a lot of them played by ear. So I developed my ear very well before I learned the theory behind it. And when I did learn it, it was, well, it was kind of a revelation. It sort of put everything together for me.
I hear you.
And I understood more about how it worked and how you would notate a certain thing. But I could hear it, but I didn't know the right terms for it. I could play it, but I didn't know what you called it.
Got it. I do have a question of your use of NNS. Do you use it now? Do you now use it exclusively? I don't suppose so, right? Or do you use it in combination with stave notation, guitar tap, chord symbols, or any of those others? Or?
I use it in conjunction with any other kind of notation. A lot of times in Nashville, they use number charts, you know, because they're so versatile. And if the singer changes keys, which does happen quite often, you know, the chart is still good for another key. But regular notation and chord charts with, you know, with letters instead of numbers, I use those all the time too. It just depends. Like the leader of a session on the Musicians Union, every session has a leader, and sometimes the leader will write a chart and have them printed out, which everybody used to write them out by hand. But whatever the leader writes out, you're expected to be able to read it.
So.
But one more thing, music. Usually record sessions don't have an arranger who writes out everybody's part. Now, film scores and movie scores, you have an arranger and everybody plays a written part and you stick to that part. But the musicians that get hired for record sessions, especially in Nashville, are hired for their creativity and their ability to make up their own parts and play what fits the song.
Yes, I understand what you're saying, and I have questions about that part for some of you as well, but I will proceed for Gary to the charts that you so generously sent me. But before I do that, I can't quite see the microphone that you're using for your voice. Is that separate from what you had set up for your guitar? Can we kind of place a microphone between you and the guitar so we can hear your playing? I'm just being helpful here.
Well, you know, I wasn't thinking about playing when I set everything up. So I'm just using the mic in my computer,
Ah.
and I don't know how to adjust the audio settings. Now, if I play,
We should
can
be
you
able to
tell me
hear
if you
your
can hear?
guitar. That's strange.
There might be noise suppression on it. I don't know. Under
Yeah,
your
there definitely is. There definitely is.
under your
That's-
settings, probably.
Uh,
Your system settings.
It could be tricky to trace because I think it's part of the app. I think it's part of.
Oh, it might be, yeah.
Yeah, I
It
don't think
could
it's.
be
I don't think
part
it's
of
the
the
apps. Yeah.
You can
Uh,
toggle to low versus high, but that's the best
yeah,
I got
the
so
only
far.
thing I have here under audio settings. Oh, I didn't do anything.
I can only say that anytime I've ever done music with YouTube, I've had a separate digital audio converter that I use to feed it in a different way because it just doesn't really work.
Yeah.
Okay, here's an adjustment. All right, let's see if this does anything.
Yeah.
Okay,
What did you adjust, Gary?
it says reduce background noise, low and high. It says reduces
Yeah, that's
softer
correct.
noise in the background.
Yeah. Well, but where did you do that in the app?
I did it, yeah, in the app under audio settings. I clicked on audio settings and it has a few settings.
Under the system, right? Yeah.
And it's under reduced background noise. It was on high, and I put it on low.
Yep.
So
That's it. We can hear it.
It worked.
Excellent. Let's do it. So I'm going to change scenes as they call it. This scene will include Gary's first shot that he sent me, which is Into the Mystic. And I just want to quickly mention how your minor chords are indicated with a small m instead of a slash. So your Into the Mystic has that phenomenon. The next one you sent me, Sweet Baby James, has also a small m to indicate minor chords. But in your Suzanne, you have the slash, the little slash next to the minor chord to indicate the same quality. So you decide which one you'd like to play for us, but I have a question as to your use of the two. Did you just decide to do something different that day, or there was a reason why you used the M and not the slash?
It could have been that somebody else wrote one of those charts. I just grabbed these charts off my phone, and I'm not even sure if I wrote them or somebody else wrote them.
No worries.
But okay, like Sweet Baby James, I can hardly read it on my phone. It's just tiny, so I wrote it a little bigger. Now, Sweet Baby James is the one that I'm looking at, and it's in 3/4. So you see that it's in 3/4. And the intro, I'll play it slowly. It's so it's like a 4 chord, which would be an F. Actually, the song is in D. So what I do on guitar to get open voicings is put a capo 2nd fret and play in a C shape. But anyway, so you have a 4 chord and a 1/3 down to the 2 minor. So that happens over and over again. Whenever you see a 4 chord followed by a 1/3, it almost always goes to the 2 minor. And then have a 5 sus4 to a 5. Anyway, so the verse is unusual because he writes 5-bar phrases instead of 4-bar phrases. So this song is unusual in that regard because he writes 5-bar phrases. So it's like Da, 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 da. Anyway, and the chorus goes. There's a 2 major. Anyway, so that's an example of how that works.
Thank you very
So
much,
it was,
Gary. And for
yeah.
those of you who don't know Sweet Baby James, of course, it's a James Taylor piece. If you want to look
I
it
wish I
up.
could the words and the right melody, but I can't remember.
You're good.
It's a beautiful.
What's I gonna say? Yeah, Gary, I do have a picture that you sent me of a session. It looks like a session because everyone's sitting down holding an instrument. Is there a reason why you sent me that picture? Is that something of note? Did you want to tell us a story about it?
That was actually a rehearsal at the Musicians Union in Nashville for a gig, and it was just an example of a rhythm section reading number charts. As you can see, like there's a guitar. Okay, when you record a recording session, everybody's not in the same room because you would get bleeding into the one instrument would bleed into the other, and the drums in a separate booth and acoustic guitar and all that. So that particular photo was actually a rehearsal at the Musicians Union and not a session.
Thank you.
It's the one I'm thinking about.
That's all right, Gary. Thank you so very much. So the next topic I want to address is bluegrass, and it has to do with Ryan because he's a bluegrass player. But first of all, I want to say I love bluegrass. I refer to it as speed country. Not speed metal, speed country. And I was invited to play penny whistle on a Foggy Mountain Breakdown at the Grapevine Opry in 2008. So I know how it feels like in that vehicle speeding down the highway. But for those of you who are not familiar with bluegrass, you have very simple chord progressions that serve to support the improvisation that's at the heart of bluegrass. But there's only so much improv you can do when it's going so fast. And the song gets faster and faster and faster. And I always admire the bluegrass players. They're standing so still, but they're moving so fast, and I'm struggling along. But anyway, I wanted to thank Rocky Gribble, who invited me to play at the Grapevine Opry, and he played banjo alongside me. So Rocky, if you're watching, good to see you then. Thanks for the invite. So Ryan, you were 12 when you discovered NNS at a bluegrass jam session. Could you please give us the juicy details and how you reacted to seeing NNS and so on and so forth?
Yeah, we didn't. As a 12-year-old sitting in my first couple of bluegrass jams with my banjo, and your viewers will know that a banjo in bluegrass is tuned to an open G chord, and anything that's not in the key of G, we hate it. It's what a disaster. I've grown a little bit past that, but at the time, I was pretty much good in the key of G, and that was it. And so we're packing around capos. And I'm sure Tim will be upset that as a fiddle player, he wasn't allowed the privilege of a capo. But when you're sitting there with an instrument that is, much more at home in a very limited key set, and everybody else is on a different instrument tuned to something else, capos are life and death, and that's really a big part of the sound of bluegrass. And to speak that language then, I sit there with my banjo, the bass player would be thumping along, and he'd just, between quarter notes, he'd just go 4, 1, 5, 2, and here's me sitting there, 3 months of banjo lessons under my belt, just saying, man, nobody explained G, C, D, and 4 like I didn't. I was just dumbfounded, and And as I learned that bluegrass language, it wasn't until I got to college that I realized that was just the cleanest and most functional version of chord function I'd ever had explained to me in my life. And it went on to serve me really well, but here are these bluegrass musicians. Some of these old boys couldn't read the Reader's Digest on the coffee table, but they were explaining chord function in depth and explaining, you know, the numbers are really great because once, and I think this was just said, once you know what chord you're going to, like Sweet Baby James, once you know you're on a 4 chord, the likelihood of the next chord being what you think it's going to be is way up. And if you're on a 5, you know what's next. And if you're on a 5/7, you definitely know what's next. And you know, the likelihood of getting the next chord right, you just learn to read the future in that way as you understand basic chord function. And that's what bluegrass did for me, was got me a really good sense of, if this is happening now, what's likely to happen next. And if we wanted to get exciting about it, what could we change, you know? So the guys, the old boys I would play with, they'd say, well, you know, let's swap this 1 for a 6, or let's swap this 4 for a 2 or something. And I finally figured out what they were talking about. Got to college, they taught me the same words, but with a lot more syllables, you know. They don't say 4, they say subdominant, submedian, and all that. And I have to put on my bluegrass accent to sound like I know what I'm talking about. But watching the overlap between these hillbillies, which I'm proud to consider myself one, watching that overlap between those and the musicologists' world just made me realize what a small world we're all living in. And it just got real easy to not take sides on genres or composers or anything like that anymore. We're all playing by the same rules, and the numbers system is just a different dialect.
Thank you, Ryan. You spoke that so eloquently. You almost summarized how I feel about the National Number System. But you also made an interesting point, how useful a tool it is to have in song construction. Yeah, as you were saying, you know, substituting 6 for 3 or 5 for 4 or that kind of thing, because you just see the chord progressions in front of you in number form and with no other distraction. So you can just pull out that number and replace it with another, and there's a new song, or that's maybe a more favorable harmonic progression than what you had previously, and you go, oh, I really like the way the song's going.
Yeah, I use the number system in songwriting classes. When students come to the table with a 3-chord song, we speak in numbers to talk about what substitutions are most likely to happen. And then once we've made those substitutions, we talk about which embellishments are best suited to these different chord functions. So, you know, the 4 chord lends itself to certain embellishments, and the 5 chord lends itself to different embellishments. And once they've got that down, their songwriting just speeds right along.
That's wonderful. Everyone hear that? That's your new songwriting tool. But Ryan, you use NNS almost exclusively in your work, and I understand you worked across the nation as a multi-instrumentalist and producer. And I'm curious, of course, to know if NNS is favored far and wide. Every corner of America, or maybe beyond, who knows? Have you experienced that?
I think everybody, everywhere I've been, speaks some version of it. I mentioned to you earlier, and I'm curious to see what these boys think too. I grew up out west in the United States, and it was very common for you to get to the bridge and for somebody to say, hey, on this bridge, just play footballs. And I would say, okay, sure, footballs. And then I would go east, and nobody knew what a football was. They'd all say diamonds. And I'd say, well, I don't know what diamonds are, and why are they tiny? Why we got tiny diamonds? And so learning to, like I said, switch dialects has been great. But I don't think I've been anywhere in my line of work. And like was said earlier, in my line of work, you get hired for making records. So you show up and you do have freedom to interpret your role as needed. And that's so great. I think I'd go crazy if somebody handed a part to me that told me what to play as a banjo player. That just defeats. But I'm a banjo player. I couldn't read it anyway. So that's those are the kinds
I need to
of
give you an
jobs I've
applause.
done. What's that?
That's applause for your joke.
Yeah, joke. I think it's pretty universal. I think the six of us could sit down on a session and all read each other's charts and pick up a thing or two along the way.
With that said, I want to show the viewers what you're talking about regarding footballs versus diamonds, and I do have one of your charts. Thank you so much for sending it to me. And it's a Pickup Man. According to Ryan, it's the last gig he played on, or at least the last song he played on. And indeed, as Ryan promised us, he did indicate, he did provide some diamonds here in this chart, and I'm circling it because his chart's so neat. It's so clean and so neat, and I like clean and neat. But
Well,
sorry, Ryan.
I need to confess something to you,
Uh-oh.
which is that there is an app for iPad called OneChart, and this chart was made in one listen of the song, and then I went back and put in some of that rhythmic stuff. So
Is
if
that
it's a
so?
if it's a 3.5 minute song, this is probably a 5-minute chart, and that's the beauty of the numbers system. And especially when you're using that OneChart app, and they're not paying me to say this, it was a really quick and easy tool for me to start dragging an iPad around, transcribe a song on the fly, share it with everybody in the room, just like they were saying, and you know, in a 5-minute chart, like I said, I discovered in the session that there were 3 errors in this chart, but you know what? My brain's big enough to remember 3 things in a session. So the chart ended up working really well. It's got the form on there. It's got the 2/4 bars. It's got a couple of, first and second ending. The bridge, you'll see the footballs on the first 2 bars of the bridge.
Yeah.
And a couple of rhythmic things that needed to be put in. And that's all I've ever used it for, and that's served me for 90% of my work.
So, because I was going to ask you, because I thought such a brilliant piece of work, if I may say so, and I've circled your beat durations for your rests. So you've used, OneChart, you used traditional notation to indicate rests in this area here. And I thought this was of your own conjuring, so I was gonna praise you on how great this chart was. Now I know it's all a lie. But I was curious. So anyone who uses OneChart would end up having something similar to yours. So you could be creating a cult of NNS users, a subgroup of NNS users using OneChart, representing rests with traditional rests and using those diamonds for a whole note that's to be held and and rings through that entire bar. And time signatures as I said, I use the term brackets to mean the 2 smiling lines that enfold or embrace something in between. So you use brackets for time signature changes with a time signature in front of it, in between it. But you also use those beat divisions we were talking about earlier on to indicate, the number of beats played, or the way beats will be played for that particular chord, if you know what I'm trying to say. So OneChart's actually brought together its own fusion.
Yes. Well, I'll say 2 things. I think OneChart is a fusion, but I think the Nashville Number System is a fusion. I don't look at the number system as a separate language entirely. It's just a shorthand of the same language we're all speaking. And as much as I like to pick on us bluegrass hillbillies for not knowing anything, we do know a thing or two about music, and Nashville is just, that number system is just a really convenient dialect of the same language we're all speaking.
So I just have one question left. Insofar as how the rests are indicated by using traditional symbols, would you expect that for the reader, or would one chart expect the reader to know what these traditional symbols are since it's using it? So in a case where your reader is not familiar with traditional symbols, what would you do?
Well, I build a chart for the players I'm sitting with. And that's another advantage of the numbers system, is I can build a chart on the fly, look around the room and be like, well, I got a woodwind guy, I got a fiddle guy, I got a guitar guy, and what are they going to want? I have found, and I'd love to have the other guys argue with me a little, I've found that if you don't know how to transcribe for an instrument in the numbers system, you just dumb it down and trust these musicians to pencil in what they need for themselves. I go with a less is more type of chart. Yeah. This chart you're looking at here, I knew who I was sitting with, and I knew if I didn't mark those stops, they'd blow right through them. But if I trusted my players not to blow through the stops, I wouldn't even slow down enough to notate it.
Ron, are you prepared to play through this song for us?
I mean, I have a guitar and I know all three of those chords, so.
Thank you.
Sure. I'll pick it up from the verse, and then I'll play a chorus, if your listener wants to follow along. So you got 4 bars of 1, 2 bars of 4, 2 bars of 1. Next line of the verse. 2, 3, 4. Those are the rests. Into the verse, to the chorus. And you'll notice everything's broken into groupings of 4 measures. Here's the second line of the chorus. 2, 3, 4, 1. So that was that 2/4 bar with the stops. I notated beats. I now remember why I put those 2 hash marks over the 2/4 bar. It's to double emphasize that that is a 2/4 bar and you're hitting both of those. And I just realized I played it in the wrong key, but that's the beauty of the numbers chart. Who cares?
That was brilliant, Ryan. Thank you so much for that demonstration. When I first saw it, as I said, I found it easy to read, having, classical background as well as popular style, a background in popular style, so I found it easy to read. And One Shot did do a brilliant job with having those stops, those little bullet points to indicate a bar line even. It was quite clear to me that that was a period, so to speak. And even with the time signature changes and your safety measures with the double slash just in case, the safety measures, that was also very clear to me. So I had no problems reading it. I just had all these questions just to mess with you.
Thanks.
Oh, no worries. I got just a couple more questions for you before I move on to the next person. And I do understand that your work often blends Americana with folk and other modern textures, perhaps. Do you have a particular way, because we covered, more complex rhythmic patterns, but do you have a particular way to communicate more nuanced harmonic content, more complex or more sophisticated harmonies, instead of the more straightforward ones that we've been dealing with?
2 weeks ago, I used the One Chart app to transcribe 90 minutes of Stevie Wonder music, and I think I found the limits of what the numbers system can do.
Oh, yeah?
And the guys are just laughing at me for even trying it. And I know now. My job was to provide a basic chart, mostly form and for for a band to work their way through 90 minutes of Stevie Wonder, which is not 3-chord bluegrass stuff by any means. And what I ended up doing was at the end of the day, I delivered numbers charts. And here's another life hack I probably shouldn't confess. The One Chart app has a little toggle switch, and the second you're done charting the tune, you can throw the toggle and it'll convert your numbers chart into a letters chart. And that helps you to understand, like in Stevie's case, he uses chord functions so brilliantly that it's not predictable always. And so
Yeah.
when you get a letters chart in front of you, you're able to understand it from a different angle than if you're looking at the numbers that he's using. So I was, as I transcribed songs from the Key of Life, I would toggle back and forth and make sure that the numbers and the letters were both conveying what I thought was the easiest way to read down those tunes. And I use, like the guys were saying, I don't think this chart I sent you has any slash chords, which is I think what we call, where you designate the root note or the bass note, the figured bass. But I use a lot of slash chords, and I'll even just quickly comment, hey, do this here, which I'm sure a real musician would be upset at, but I've already covered that I'm a banjo player, so.
No, I don't think you should dumb yourself down, Ryan. I think you've done a brilliant job, and everything that you have tried to explain to us has been very clear to me. And I use Fusion a lot too. And I teach score reading and production to my students, and I say to them, what's important is that as an arranger, the player must be able to get all the messages you want them to get clearly. So do it anyway. Italian terms, simple, plain English. Just
Yeah.
do what you
Well,
need to.
I think, was it Tim? Tim, you said we're not here to make charts, we're here to make records. So whatever you got to put in front of people so they can do their job.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
That was
Thanks.
Gary, I think.
Gary, yeah.
I don't remember saying that.
Well, that's what I heard. So thanks, buddy.
I probably said it if it was smart. Yeah, that was me.
That's great.
Thanks, Ryan. One last question. We're curious as to the artists that you worked with in your traveling far and wide. Quote my previous question. Do most of them use NNS or refer to NNS or a fusion style?
Inside of country music, which is the genre that traveled me the most, yes. But the genre that I probably played the second most as I traveled was jazz, and the answer is
Yeah.
not at all.
Okay.
Not for a second does anybody try to present a jazz standard in number chord function. It just wouldn't last. It wouldn't last 8 bars.
Yeah. Thanks for that.
Well, I think Ryan's point is very accurate. Is the number charts work very well when you're staying like within a key for the most part. If you're modulating all the time, a number chart starts to fizzle out, because to me, if I see a 6 minor chord, it's got to sound like a 6 minor chord to me.
Yeah.
And if you've transposed and it becomes something else, then it throws me off, because really with a chart, what you want to be able to do is kind of not read the chart. You want to be able to hear the chart. You hear you hear it. And like when I look at a chart, I hear it. It's like I'm not reading it. I hear it, and I know how it's going to sound, what the next chord is going to sound like. But when you've got, like, jazz can modulate 1,000,000 times in a piece, and it just doesn't work anymore, because unless each time you change and then it's a new one, which would get pretty confusing every time to have to do it. I mean, you can do it somewhat, it'll, like when Gary was talking about, if you go to a 3 chord, a 3 major chord, you're kind of almost it's sort of a transposition almost for a moment. So anyway, but yeah, it really works for, when you're kind of staying within one key, especially.
Tim's right. That's the point I was trying to make with Stevie Wonder is Stevie Wonder would use the sixth chord, but it wasn't functioning as a sixth chord. That was just the right chord for that moment. And that's why toggling to the letters suddenly would switch my brain from what the chord is functioning as to just what the chord needs to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're not just speaking in different languages as a musician, we're speaking in different dialects within a language even. Because we're multilingual, but beneath that we have these sub-species under the each language. So we should be very proud of ourselves.
In general, pop music is much simpler than jazz. For instance, if you tried to write a number chart on the jazz standard, like All the Things You Are, you're going to change keys every couple of bars, and it'd be just a nightmare to try to read that. But most pop music is simpler than that.
Thanks, everyone. Since Tim had something worthwhile to mention, and thanks, Tim, I would like to proceed to you next. As far as I know, you're a classically trained musician who was introduced to popular forms of music later. So we're curious as to your first encounter with the Nashville Number System.
Well, I was playing in country bands both in Montana and North Carolina, and we kind of used it, because like sometimes you didn't know the song and the guitar player or somebody would be shooting you kind of what's going on, or actually sometimes we even would notate what key we were playing in, like this is the key, 2 sharps, 2 flats, things like that. But where I really got into it, when I moved to town, I sat in with a band called the First Take Band. And what they were doing was songwriters would bring in their charts. They'd bring in 6 or 7 copies of 2 songs. They'd get 2 songs. They'd just walk up. It'd be spread around the bandstand. We'd count it off, and we would just play it first take. We were just doing it what was there. And so that was really kind of how I learned and really helped me learn how to do it. Of course, the songwriter got to hear their song as a product. But that really, that's kind of where I first really encountered it, kind of it was every Monday night at a club called Douglas Corner that doesn't exist. And that was really my real education into it.
Do you find yourself as a classically trained musician somewhat reaching back to that framework when you're reading NNS, or that has passed, like maybe you used to do it at the early beginnings, but you don't anymore because you are adept at handling the 2 languages, so to speak?
I read music only a few times a year, and basically I would really never notate music unless it was a passage that had a lot of 16th notes in it and went on for a while. I mean, otherwise, like the chart that I gave you, for instance, and this was a songwriter I was playing with, I wrote out the melody in numbers. It's just kind of easier, numbers, and then of course using quarter notes and half notes to kind of use this. So I'm kind of combining it in that way. But for the most part, I say that I have filed off the sharp corners of my square head that classical music did to me to be able to function in this more open-minded improvisational world, shall I say.
I do have, Tim, your chart displayed now, the one that's titled No Choice.
No choice, right.
So,
And here, like this wasn't for a session, and so actually I put a few things in here because this is a songwriter. And like at one point I had 2 drawers of my filing cabinet just full of charts for people that I had played for. Because you play for them and then maybe 2 months later you play for them again. And this way I had the chart. I kind of said, where I played the intro and what the tag is, put as many cues in there because, you know, a lot of times you're rehearsing on a Tuesday and the gig is Friday. And I want to be and of course I'm doing a lot of other music before that Friday. And so I just want to be able to kind of make it as easy as myself to play well the first time I'm going to play the song. And yeah, so that's just kind of how I did it. And I also had some other, like for a session, I wouldn't, if I was a recording session, I wouldn't have to write out all these things because I can remember, hey, yeah, you got the third verse. Yeah, let's do it this way. But the other thing that I would do is anytime there were repeat signs or a DC sign or anything like that, I would take a magic marker and mark that in a different color so it would stick out to me. So there's no way I'm going to miss it. And I had a friend that even took it one step further, and that is he would use different colors for repeat signs and for the DC and for the coda. I mean, he used different colors for it, and it was all a way so that when he was coming to the gig, he was not going to make a mistake that's kind of easy to do. You know, oh yeah, I should have gone here. You can't have that. You know, you've got to be able to do it right the first time when you're doing a live performance like that for someone that you've hardly ever played with. So
Do you tend to then use, because I noticed you use DC, coda, and those Italian terms which are navigational signs of the classical category, do you tend to
Right.
use those for that purpose instead of English, let's say? Because it's quite widely used, isn't it? When most musicians, when they see it, they know what it implies. Do you tend to do this?
yeah, I have found that in Nashville, everybody kind of knows what that is. So I guess I never even found yeah, it's just this, yeah, just that. As far as I know, everybody in town uh, knows what that means and knows what retard means and any of these things. And people do know what a half note looks like and what a quarter note looks like. And people do know what a half note rest looks like. I mean, these are so that part of the classical music nomenclature has leaked into the Nashville number system for sure. Uh, but it's so utilitarian, especially, you know, because like, you know, like I said, Ryan, we could be in the key of B flat and Ryan's got his capo on the third fret. And if I was to say, well, hey, this is a, you know, we come to the E flat there in the bridge and Ryan has to go E flat, like what, you know, instead. But if I say that's the four chord, it's just so simple. And these days, if someone's got a keyboard, I mean, a lot of people, I'll tell you, they're playing everything in the key of C. The keyboard player is, you know, so like he's transposing everything, uh, you know, and
I hear you.
everything like that. And I have to tell Ryan that, you know, when I played bluegrass and they told me that this song was in the key of B, I thought they were kidding. I said, what? I couldn't possibly imagine that.
Tim,
But a
a
lot of
buddy of mine,
bluegrass.
a
was
buddy
in
of mine
that.
travels with two fiddles, one for every key and one for B or B flat.
Right,
He's just not
right.
having it.
That's like me and my penny whistle. They're diatonic instruments, so you have to have one for each major key and its relative minor. So yeah, I travel with 3 or 4 different tin whistles for the most
Well, you know,
common keys. That is.
Well, you know, until I moved to Nashville, I never kept a second fiddle because I learned how to play in those keys. But you know, the key of B in bluegrass had a certain sound and people were looking for it. But in Nashville, if a female singer, for instance, is singing in the key of E flat or A flat, they're not really singing in that key because they want that kind of sound. They're singing in that key because it works for their voice, but they don't necessarily want to have the fiddle sound like A flat because the difference with fiddle, how fiddle sounds in A flat versus A is very different. A flat is very warm. A is very open. And so, you know, like you don't want to have a Cajun tune in D flat. It's not going to sound the same as a Cajun tune in the key of C. So having those, half-step fiddles is, serves a function within this kind of music. Because look, in classical, right, music originally started without voice, the instrumental, right? It was just instrumental music, and each key had a certain feeling to it, had a certain color, whatever you want to think to it. But in Nashville, we're not looking for that. We're looking for what the singer sounds good in. And that's it's a whole different. We serve the song, and the singer delivers the song, and we're there to help that.
I hear what you're saying. Um, are you keen to play through that song for us, Tim? You think?
Well, I'd be my mandolin is I haven't too it's terribly out of tune. I'm probably not gonna. I mean, number one, I would have to say I must love this guy because he's singing Irish music in the key of E flat, and I'm going like, wow, I must really like this guy to, which is not. But look, and I'll be honest, I have no idea what this tune. I may play with. This is one of the few books of charts I've kind of kept for people, but I have no idea really what this song sounds like, and I don't think I'd really add a lot to it. But you can see in there that I notated the melody in the lower right hand corner, so I would remember what that sounded like, and I could, right. I could play that, and I could, if I hear him when I go to rehearse it, if I was to do it again or listen to it, if he sent me an MP3 or something, then I kind of put that there so I would remember it from Tuesday to Saturday.
No worries. Thanks, Tim. I want to ask you a last question, but it involves Neal as well, because you worked with Neal on several projects, I know. So I'm just curious on the eclectic projects that you've. Sorry, I muted my mic on the live streaming site, so I'll start that again. Tim, you work with Neal quite a bit. You've worked on several projects together, and I'm just curious on the eclectic projects that you worked on, diverse projects. What has been the most interesting observation you've made of the function of NNS, if you have any observations?
Well, when I think of the Nashville Number System, I think it's just, it's no different than what is a key signature in classical music. It's something that makes sense and makes it as easy as possible for the musician. I mean, think if someone gave you a part and every single classically sheet music and every single note had a sharp or a flat by it or a natural by it, and you had to play a large number of notes that way, it would be very difficult, and you couldn't play it quickly. But if you put a key signature in front of it, then everybody kind of knows what notes are sharp and flat and natural or whatever. And to me, the Nashville Number System is just the same way. It's just very utilitarian and makes it. And look, the Nashville, when we're doing demo sessions and you've got a band there, you're doing 5, sometimes 6 songs in a 3-hour session, and you're finishing them. And the whole idea is that it's just so quick. It's so easy. Everybody kind of knows. The leader can talk about it in the way about who's got the head and what it's going to be. And, Batman ending. I mean, we have lots of ways of talking about it, but it's just a system that allows us to be very, very efficient. That's how I look at it.
Thanks, Tim. Neal.
Yeah, on the Julie Follow song, did you write that in Nashville Number System, or did you just improvise that fiddle solo? I don't know if you remember it or not.
Oh, I'm sure I would never write out a solo. I'm sure
I didn't think you did.
It. And well,
Okay,
the other thing is that, I mean, it's kind of different when I'm recording it, because here I can play it and, oh man, I messed that up. Play it again, punch it in, fix it or whatever. It's so much faster just to play it, to listen to it and play it. It's just much faster. I mean, it takes a lot of time, at least for me, to really, if I was to write out and notate something, I would just, we're just used to, kind of like Gary said, we're used to, what I always say is, our job is to come up with something timeless in present time.
You did.
Thanks,
It was
Tim.
great.
Neil, we know that you were classically trained, but we're kind of curious as to when you picked up the National Number System. But of course, you're from Nashville. Could that have been where you picked it up?
Oh yeah, you're talking to me, right?
Yes, Neil.
Oh, okay, because it canceled out for a second.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, I saw it early on when I was a child. I used to attend sessions at Monument and RCA, and I would see the musicians charting out the songs and listening down, to a demo or somebody playing guitar or piano, and they would chart out the songs, and I was like, wow, this is great, because it was like, I'd already been taking piano lessons and stuff, so I was like, okay, um, I see what they're doing. It's basically, the one chord, five chord, four chord, whatever chord progression they were playing. And then I was like, oh, okay, that's how they notate a minor. Okay. And then I was like, and and that's how I learned, just from watching them and staying quiet, not getting in the way. So, and then later, when I started working with things on my own, that's what everybody used, um, is the number system, because it's so much faster, just to find the chord progressions real simply. And you can, like everybody said, you can change the key and it really doesn't matter. You just follow the chart. So.
So I know that you run a music production and orchestral scoring business, and you work primarily in the classical realm, but you also have projects in the rock and folk genres. Whilst you've been collaborating with musicians from diverse styles and
Right.
players of varying theory, knowledge, and training, would you say that NNS helps streamline that communication? I guess
Oh
I'm
yeah.
coming from the angle where I believe NNS is very quick to pick up for anyone with even just basic music knowledge.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because everybody pretty much knows there's 8 notes in a scale, like a major scale. I mean, you have 7 plus the tonic, uh, and so everybody knows, like, if you're in C major, C would be 1, uh, and F would be 4. So it's pretty universal. I think most people can pick up on it pretty fast, even if they didn't know it. There's a lot of notation, like an augmented, has a plus sign, uh, so it's, you can get into it pretty heavy. There's different notations for everything, and a lot of people didn't know, like what footballs mean, and in diamonds, which just means like hanging the notes, that they are written over, those notations. And repeat signs, everybody kind of knows what that is, and most people know a great deal of classical notation that use the NNS. So it's not really a stranger to most people. So wouldn't you guys agree?
Yeah.
The educator in me feels like I have to clarify maybe something for your listeners, which is we've been talking about numbers and scale degrees, but the Nashville numbers, those are the chords built on the scale degrees. And then earlier, I think Tim was talking about writing out his solo in numbers, and I'm sure he's just doing that. And those are intervals,
Yeah, those are, yeah, that's a
So
different thing.
we're mixing our numbers a little bit, but
Yeah, he was doing that
so
to simplify for him. Yeah,
yeah, that's
a lot of people.
Perfect segues though, because that's exactly where I'm going to come in with the
Yeah,
scales because of this.
right. Yeah, people do things, just to whatever works for them. I've seen people write things that are a lot different, but they understand it. And if they're reading the chart, that's all they have to do is understand what they're reading. So.
Thanks, Neil. And before we jump to PC, I do have one final question for you, but everyone else in the panel, please feel free to give us your thoughts. And we did touch on improvisation with NNS, that NNS facilitates improvisation. You know, it gives you some freedom to move around a bit. You're not stuck to written notes, specific notes that you have to play. So would you think, Neal, and anyone, you know, in the panel, therefore, that perhaps NNS is a good way to instruct in the concept of improvisation? I know you don't teach improvisation, you don't teach anyone how to improvise, but could it kind of help introduce that? It gives some kind of a bit or a framework you can work with?
It's a structure, yeah. It's a chord structure, you know, and you can have articulations and the whole framework, you know, of how you can improvise. If you know the scales that that contain, you know, the chords that you're playing, you know, yeah, you can improvise around that framework. So that's what it's for, really. Yeah.
I actually think that what I know about the National Number System, which is really relatively new, that it's a songwriting device. For me, it's been most helpful as a songwriting device. And so I'll elaborate on that when we get to me.
Oh, we're at you now, PC, and I wanted to say
I
it's
said it was a
your
good.
turn.
It was a good segue.
Yeah, it was
That's
great. Good timing. So, PC, you've had a very industrious and illustrious career as an engineer and producer working with R&B, hip hop, and soul artists. So we have veered from country, rock, bluegrass. We're now in a different realm. Please tell us how you first came in contact with NNS, and if it's the main device you use perhaps to create charts, or you use a combination of.
So the first time I heard NNS was last week when Neal asked me if I wanted to come and talk about it. And I was like, what is NNS? And I've actually asked a few other people at Berkeley. All the guitar players know what it is, but many of the other people don't. And okay, so which goes to my point. I start off as a woodwind player. So I come at this whole thing from scales. And when I wrote my first song, James Brown was big, so all I needed to know was one chord. Get it. All I needed to know was one chord. I did not have to know a 5 or a 4 or anything. I was like, this is cool. I'll do this for the rest of my life. So I put out my first album, and it's like, oh, I have to write a ballad? Oh, okay. So now I have to know more about what's going on with the chords. So I come from the woodwinds playing, you know, major scales, minor scales, diminished scales, augmented scales, and then going to the piano and seeing those scales in a linear fashion. The guitar was like a mystical, magical instrument to me. I had no clue what was going on in the guitar. And now I'm 21. I put my first record out. I could play a little bit on the guitar because one of my friends showed me how to play some bar chords. I still didn't know what I was doing. So I took the guitar, I sat down, I was like, okay, if this is E and that's A, and I go there, I'm playing the 9. And then I actually figured it out myself and said, okay, now I can see this instrument based on 4s in a linear fashion. And then I was like, okay, so if I know this chord, all I got to do is move my hand up there, and I'm playing a half step up, and up there, now I'm playing a whole step up. So the idea of the National Number System makes perfect sense to me, and it would make sense to me that a guitar player would be the one to figure it out, not a piano player, because a piano player is looking at this stuff in a more linear fashion. So the first time I actually heard something called a 5 or a 4 was in jazz with the 2-5-1. And I was like, what is a 2-5-1? And I don't know if you can hear the flute. Can you hear this? That's a 2-5-1. That's a 2-5-1 in G. So the first time I heard it was a 2-5-1, and it was this famous jazz musician, and my uncle was really, really like, oh, my son, he plays, he plays the saxophone really well. And I go to this jazz musician, he said, spell me a 2-5-1 in G. I was like, I don't even know what a 2 is. I don't know what a 5 is. And that was the first time that I was presented with the chord system as numbers. So I had gone through the modes, Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian. And then the concept of tonic and supertonic and median was a little bit tricky for me, but I eventually got that. But when I finally went around from soul music and went through doing the ballads and soul and went all the way to pop music into the Beatles, I was like, oh, that's 1, 4, 5, 6, 1. And then it started to get really, really interesting to me. So I use a combination of, so I start off, my first woodwind was the clarinet. And if you know anything about the clarinet, you have to transpose. So the bottom of the clarinet is actually the note C, if I'm holding these notes down, and the top of it is the note G. So the first instrument that I worked with, I had to transpose, and I'm transposing notes. So I knew music and getting through transposition. Like if something was in the key of E flat and we said it was in E, I'm literally looking at a score in E flat, and my brain is transposing every note to the key of E or every note to the key of F. That's how I learned music. And I did not study music. I taught myself music. But check this out. I only lived 5 blocks from Berkeley. So I grew up as a kid 5 blocks from Berkeley. I was there all the time. They didn't stop me from coming in. I was a high school kid going through all these classes, learning, buying the books. Who was it that said they bought books? Was it Gary? You said you bought books? Yeah, I bought all the books and learned. Like I have a college degree. I have a college level understanding of music, but I taught myself by getting all the books that the guys who were in college were getting. So once I started to write songs, it became a little clearer to me that this was the device. And then I bumped into Stevie Wonder, and he's using augmented chords, and I said, whoa. So trying to use the numbering system with Stevie Wonder is very difficult. But I love the work of some of the modern pop producers like Phineas that works with Billie Eilish, Billie Eilish's brother. He's using simple Beatles chords. Post Malone is using simple Beatles chords. Once I really, really understood what everyone was doing, I'm like, oh, this is like country music. There's a form of certain chords that fit together, and like 500 people write 500 songs off of that same form. And that's, so that really, it's not a foreign thing to me at all. Like I said, Neal is the one that told me. He said the Nashville numbering system, and I was like, oh, you mean like the 5 chord, the 4 chord, the 1 chord? He said, yeah. I was like, okay, I get that. Now I have been doing it for a while. I just didn't know what it was called. I didn't know it was called the Nashville numbering system. And the way that I learned it wasn't with a number 1, a number 2, a number 3. It was with Roman numerals. So a big Roman numeral was major. A small Roman numeral, like I with dots over it, was minor. So if I go from big I to big 3, then I've done what's called the chromatic median, where I've taken what should be a minor chord, but now I'm making the 3 a major chord. I'm actually changing the middle note to a major note. And that's the same thing. When Gary was talking about his song, my song is the same way. I go from an E flat major to a G major, which should normally be a G minor. And then I go from 1 to 3 major to 6 to 4. And then back around 1, 3 major, 6, 4. And then notating, like in one of my songs, I think the bass plays the 3rd of the chord. And then I use the Roman numeral in the score that I have, but I do Roman numerals sometimes. Sometimes I do the number. I usually do the slash for minor. If I'm going to have like E flat, my E flat minor would be an E flat with a slash. So for me, it's a combination. I'm kind of like quick in the moment. I'm trying to think. I'm looking at the person across from me. It's a guitar player. Okay, so let me use 1, 3, 5. It's a piano player. So let me use E flat, A flat, C. And I'm kind of like moving in the moment, trying to figure out exactly how to communicate.
So it's interesting that you've been able to maximize the use as of yourself being a multilinguist in this sense, and you're adapting using the lingo that the person you're working with is speaking in, if I may say so. So
as a producer, that's in some ways that's the gig. to make the artists that I'm working with feel comfortable, and for me to be able to speak to them kind of in their language. So I'm trying to morph as much as I can and really, really communicate with the person as much as I can.
Excellent. I have your chart, PC. Let me bring it up. The one you're referring to. Did we? Yeah, we did talk about it. Now you're here. It's an R&B song. Oh, it's for an R&B artist, Double Ray, if I'm not wrong. It's a
Yeah, the
latest.
record is out right now, so go buy it, but go stream it.
It's Now You're Home. And you produced the album or just the song? You produced
Yeah,
the
I
album.
produced it and wrote it, and wrote the song with Debo.
Wonderful.
And yeah, so if you can hear it on the flute, like that's like E flat major, right? And then if I go to the letter A, and then I'm at the one more revolution for that, and then I'll go to the pre-chorus, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Actually, I went to the wrong chord there. The 3 chord is G, and no, I should have gone to the C. So back to the chorus, that type of thing. So see what I'm doing right now with my flute? That's how I learned chords.
Wow.
I was listening to one note at a time and trying to come up with a way to feel the chord. So that's why I came up with paradiddles, like. Did you feel the chord movement?
Yeah, I've
And-
never heard
and it-
anyone use the paradiddles for a wind instrument.
Well, yeah, it's a percussion term, but that thing.
Yes, I was familiar with that from working with drummers, but this is the first time I've heard it used by a wind player, and I think it's very appropriate.
That's what happens when you teach yourself.
In bluegrass music, a paradiddle just means 2 diddles.
Now.
Well, you learn something new every day. PC, I also have your alternative chart of the same song where, as you were describing earlier on, you use chord symbols in place of your Roman numerals, for just in case you're speaking, you need to speak in that language. And I'm displaying it right now. I'll give it a second.
Yeah. So
There we go.
this is in 6. This is in 6/8, and each one of those slash marks represents a dotted quarter note, 3/8 notes. So I mean that's pretty obvious, you know. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 for E flat, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 for A flat. Actually 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3. And then so everything is written like that. I don't think there are any variations in here. The coolest part of this record is at the back of the chorus. It goes from A flat major to A flat minor, and that's like where the choir is, and it goes 7 times. So it's really a nice piece.
I have noticed that you have indeed charted an evolved version of the NNS, not realizing that you were doing so. And besides using Roman numerals, you have bar lines. You know, that's contrasting with Ryan's one chart version where it used the little period dots. I forgot what you call them now. The little dots to denote break in the bar. And I noticed that your 6th, which is a minor chord, No, what did I say?
Yeah, it's a small 6. It's a small VI
Yeah, I see. Yes.
as opposed to a capital, which means it's minor. And if I wanted to put a
Yes.
7th or a 9th, all I have to do is put a 7th or a 9th. So this is classical. This is jazz notation that gets taught at Berkeley. What you're
Right.
seeing right now.
I see. Okay.
And then and then the Roman numerals is also taught in the school system, in the college school system. I don't know if Ryan, do you guys look at Roman numerals ever?
I see that a lot of the time, and I'm going to ask a question. I honestly don't know the answer to this. I think the only difference between the Roman numerals and what the guitar players, as you very aptly observed, I think it's just fewer pen strokes for me to
Yeah.
slap down a 7 instead of a VII, and
Yeah.
I think that's the only real argument in behalf of writing a number instead of a Roman numeral. I think the Roman numeral carries more meaning with it in a context
Yeah, no, I
like
love
this.
that. I love that. I love that. So I think that for the jazz musicians that use the Roman numerals, like having a 3 chord with a 9 and an 11 above it, now you've got 3 numbers, and it's like, okay, and then somebody has horrible penmanship, and all 3 of them look the same size.
Yeah, I hear
So
you.
the Roman numerals might have worked better for that type of a situation.
You can put 7s and 9s next to the numbers too, like to indicate it's a 7th or a 9th chord. Yeah.
Yeah, you use like superscript in Finale, or actually Finale's gone now. There's some other thing that they
Yeah.
have, right?
Yeah. Replaced.
But
Yeah.
the big number represents the chord, the root of
Right.
the chord, and the small number represents whether it's a 7, a major 7, a 6, or whatever. So if one of them's really big and the other one's really small, it's fairly clear.
And you can do an add 9 or whatever. Yeah.
So I spoke to 3 guitar players, the ones that had done R&B did not know about the Nashville system. The 3rd guitar player I spoke to did spend time in Nashville, and he still uses the Nashville system to this day for one of his exercises in the classes that he teaches.
Mm-hmm.
And he even said that it's a shortcut. It's a shortcut to being able to speak the chord voicings and the chord movement to people, and to have easy transposition from one key to another.
I got a couple of questions for everyone, and this is just my curiosity. So let's say we know that the blues is generally built on dominant 7 chords. Could one, if you had to chart one really quickly, could you simply just put blues in the style indicator area, like where I could do that, and just the numbers on the chart, and hope that the player knows that, oh, this is the blues, so I just make them all dominant 7s without you having to go, add the extra 7.
Yeah, you if you know it's blues, you don't have to write that it's a 7 or a 9 or a dominant chord.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. So in a similar case, if I had a piece in a minor chord or in a major chord, and we know, intuitively as a music theory person or someone trained with that in that background, that we know that all the 2nd, 3rds, and 6th would be minor chords if we were built chords based on the degrees of a major scale. Would you also do something similar where you charted a piece in a major key, but knowing that if you put 6 there, that the player would intuitively play that as a minor chord?
In the Nashville number system, you don't assume anything. What you do assume is that if you write that number, that's a major chord. If you want it to be minor, you got to write minor. You got to put a small m or a minus sign. If you want it to be diminished, you have to indicate that. But that's the unique thing about the Nashville number system, is that every number is a major chord unless you say it's not.
How do you indicate diminished in Nashville number? With a 0, a small 0?
Yeah, just a little.
Mm-hmm. Same, yeah, the same, yeah.
Same as
Diminished.
traditional.
And do you do augmented with a plus?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Major 7 can be a triangle.
Right.
Same thing.
Now,
And also, you know, when, sorry,
sorry,
ahead.
to go back to where I started when I was 12, I'm still using the same methodologies in ensembles this week, where as we're playing through songs, learning things, I'm standing in the middle of the room just doing this, and if I throw out a thumb for a 6, yeah, that's implied that that's minor, but that's not a written chart. That's just me calling chord function on the fly. And that's just where you look around the room and see what's going to happen when you do a certain thing. And kids are pretty smart these days. So
It's funny. I learned a lot of. I mean, being in Memphis, my first love is the old R&B stuff, like stuff that was coming out of Stax and some of those places. And I thought, and this is cool. And I learned all these songs. And then later, when I learned music theory, I said, well, somebody should have told the songwriters that, because that's not the way they write songs. You know, that 3 might be a major, the 6 might be a major, the 2 might be a major. So, you know, most songwriters don't have formal music training. So
Yeah.
they want to write the way they like to sound, and they don't care about the scale.
So I told you that I was, that I came to music and kind of during the funk, our soul funk, it was happening. And then I thought that Sly was writing in minor keys. And then I went and actually, once I really figured my chords out, went and played Sly's songs. He's going da 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 D major, E major, D major, E major, D major. I was like, what? I thought it was like an E minor, type of a vibe. And the whole entire song was D major, E major, G major, A major, back to D major, E major. I was like, whoa. Yeah. So this complex, the idea that, this is what I'm trying to say. The idea that that the Nashville numbering system is only for simple songs would be simplifying it. There is a lot of complexity inside the Nashville number system.
Yeah. This is just an aside. I toured with Sly back in the 60s.
My gosh.
Sly and his brother Freddie and I went to see Traffic in New York, at a nightclub in New York. Anyway, I love that.
But so you had that vibe, that feel, but yet you're playing major chords.
Yeah. Best live band I ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
In the family show. Killed everybody else.
So wait a minute, you were on the stage with Larry Graham.
Yeah.
Yeah, come on, man. Larry Graham is it. He is it.
Yeah.
So here's another question for you to solve for me. Can it be confusing reading a chart for a song in a minor key in its relative major key?
Yes, it depends on the chord progression and how many chords if it's a 3-chord song like The Thrill Is Gone, that's easy, with 1 minor, 4 minor, sharp 5 and a 5. But if it's got a lot of chords in it, you keep hearing that, you keep hearing what you think is the 5 chord moving back to the tonic, and it's not. It looks different, so it can look weird. That's the thing about the Nashville number system. Sometimes that can be a little bit difficult, I think. Sometimes I'll write it in the minor key because I don't want to look at see a 3 when I'm hearing it as a 5 or whatever.
And then there are some songs in R&B where the tonic is the 2 minor, not the 6 minor. It's Dorian.
Yeah, Dorian.
So that can get really confusing because where's the 5 at,
Like all those Santana songs in Dorian mode, like Black Magic Woman and all that stuff. That's Dorian. But I didn't know that at the time. I just learned the song and found out it was Dorian 15 years later.
But Tim, you were going to say something?
Well, yeah, I can't. pretty much I can't read a chart in one minor because when I look at something, I hear it. And if I see a 4 minor, I hear a 4 minor as something within the scale, and I can't do it. Now, the other day, there was a session we did where it actually made sense to write it in 1 minor. It was just an unusual progression, and it seemed like the easiest thing to do. But boy, you write something in 1 minor, I've pretty much got to rewrite it into 6 minor because otherwise, I have to read it and I can't hear it.
A lot of songs, the verse will be in the minor key and the chorus will go to the major, the relative major.
Yeah.
That happens. In fact, the big hit that we had in '67, The Letter, is exactly like that. The verse is in A minor and the chorus is in C major. So
there's a piece of modern technology, auto-tune. An auto-tune can tune to a major key or a minor key, and it tunes to the 6. And I was working on a song the other day, and it was in a minor 2, and I had to fudge the minor 2 in order to play the song correctly. So normally it would have been like in A minor, but I had to force it to D minor in order for it to play the correct notes because I needed the B flat. So I had to put it in D minor, even though the song might have been floating around in C. So it was something where like I had to do a transposition in order to use the piece of technology the way it's supposed to be used. So I don't know. For me, knowing the notes coming from this instrument really helped. But once I learned the guitar and started to write songs, it was like a whole nother world opened up for me.
That is such a hard question. That is the only topic that I've ever actually had a shouting match with another professor over, was 6 minor or 1 minor. So I'm glad we're having a little tiff right now too. But PC brings up, I think, the deciding factor, which is when you got a song in a major key and when you're building chords out of a major scale, the rules are pretty simple. And when you're building chords out of a minor scale, the likelihood, going back to just the likelihood of the next thing happening, the likelihood of that getting weird goes way up.
Oh yeah.
And I'm quick to jump off of the Nashville Number System for that, just because the likelihood of that being the best tool goes way down. And if it is simple enough that you can just write it 1 or 6 minor, I'm team 6 minor, and that's what this other guy wanted to punch me out for. It's like I insulted his grandma or something by saying I would read it that way.
Yeah.
I'm 6 or 2 because as a player, I hear 2 a lot in when I'm improvising. I don't always hear 6. I hear 2 quite frequently as I'm moving through chords. So for me, it would be either 6 or 2. I don't think I would use 1 minor either.
Well, there's only 1 major scale, but there's at least 3 minor scales. So you can get really confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In PC, when you're talking about a 3/11 chord, and I'm not really a jazz player. So what I think about that is like I would call that a 2 minor over 3.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
That's kind of how, if I'm at a session and someone's throwing a whole bunch of that stuff there that I'm not really good at, I will once again resort to whatever. Okay, especially given the instrument that I play,
Yeah,
which is a color kind of instrument in these kind of settings, and so I will do that. Because like here in Nashville, I mean, a 5/11 is really a 4/5, and that's something you always come across. And so I just try to, when I come across these things that I'm not, 5/6 note chords that I'm not really as intimately familiar with as I might be.
Once I know the notes in the chord, I try to name it in my head as simply as possible.
Right.
This is just a 5 chord, even though you're playing, a sharp 5 in this 5 chord. It's still a 5 chord. It's still a dominant chord. It just has a chromatic movement inside the chord.
Yeah.
But I try to simplify the chords, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
this
like
goes,
that. I like that.
this is this reminds me of high school jazz band when you'd read those old Sammy Nestico charts, and you could
Yeah.
tell that the guitar parts were transcribed by a piano player, because they would name the right chord. They're naming the right chord, but it's doing the wrong job.
Right.
So
Yeah,
right.
once you realize the job the chord is doing, you know
Yeah.
it's called something else.
Right. Right.
The
Very good.
guitar is a mystical instrument, man.
Yeah.
It's a magical instrument.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of those jazz charts, the notes they're writing in the chords are really the upper partials that the horns are playing, or the strings are playing, and the guitar, if they play the root and the third and the fifth or the seventh, if there is one, that's all you need to play. You can't play all those notes on the guitar anyway.
Right.
Yeah, the first time I heard a bass player play a B flat underneath a C chord, he was playing the seventh as the note of the C dominant chord. I was like, what? But it sounded amazing. I think it might have been in a Glenn Campbell tune, not Wichita Lineman. Say it again.
Maybe Galveston.
No, it's the one that Isaac
don't-
Hayes did also. What's Isaac Hayes?
Phoenix.
By the time I get to Phoenix. By the time I get to Phoenix.
Yeah.
That was the first time I heard that.
Yeah, Jimmy Webb does that.
Yeah. Well, I remember once I read an interview with Peter Frampton, and Peter Frampton said he knows what every note sounds against every kind of chord. And that's really kind of what you're trying to do, because really, if you play a C chord, okay, what does an F sharp sound like against the C? And of course, it really also has to do with what register is that F sharp in. Because man, if the bass was to play that versus me playing it up on the E string, it's a whole different world. And that's all that color is we're not really talking Nashville Number System, but that's the real beauty of music.
But that does speak to the complexity of trying to notate that in the NNS. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, I got to say, I've never heard the nomenclature NNS until Neal sent me an email. I've always called Nashville Number System. NNS, I'm going like, what? That's just me. I'd never heard it before referred to.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what?
Hey, there it is. Yeah.
This book
I got
by
that book.
Williams, he wrote the definitive book, and I meant to say this earlier. This Nashville guy, studio guy, he wrote the definitive book on the Nashville Number System, and it's great. It's very involved, and it has the history of it, and it has all the variations, a million examples. I mean, there's nothing about the number system that you could think of that's not in here.
Yeah.
I'm picking it up.
We're using
Yeah.
that book. We're using that book at Purdue. Our music theory teachers handing that out and making people learn it. I hand people a one-page sheet by a bassist named Dave Martin out of Nashville. If y'all know Dave Martin,
Yeah, Dave, you bet.
We're best friends.
Dave lives up here by me now because he was working at Sweetwater for a minute. He put all
Yeah.
that book onto one piece of paper,
Yeah.
and I swear he nailed it. It's all in there. So
Yeah, Dave and I played instruments
I'd love
together.
to. I'd love to see that piece of paper if you'd
Yeah, could we have a
send
copy,
it to us.
please?
Yeah, that'd be
yeah, I'm going to
great.
Google it up right now and send
Yeah.
it to y'all while I'm thinking about it.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And also, I know that Chaz Williams now has an app also for the Nashville Number System that some
Yeah,
friends of
there's
mine
an app.
use, and it's really,
Yeah.
really. And I got to say also, just like with songwriters, a lot of people I know who play a lot of gigs now have everybody's songs on tablets. So when they go play with John Peterson, they pull up his chart to make a set list of what he's got or just whatever he calls up. And it's just very, very quick. Even classical players now are all using, iPads and foot pedals for turning the pages, and it's all gone digital.
Yeah,
Yeah,
gone are the days of page turners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the whole session work thing in most of my work in R&B, the session work thing has been dwindling and dwindling for a long time, and there are some special guitar players that I bring in. But in Nashville, I feel like the guitar player is still a prominent piece of the genre, and a prominent piece of what's coming out of the city and out of the genre. And yeah, so the Nashville numbering system makes total sense to me from that point of view. And it makes sense to me that the guys in LA who didn't do Nashville time might not know it, or the guys in New York who didn't do Nashville time might not know it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was
A lot
curious,
of
PC, having worked in Boston and New York City for decades, did you find the National Number System kind of embraced enthusiastically in both cities?
So not knowing that it was called the Nashville Number System, speaking 1, 2, 4, 5, 6 usually happened when I was speaking to somebody that was either trained at Berkeley or trained at New England Conservatory.
I see.
Other than that, most of the people that I bumped into were untrained and had no clue what I was talking about. And it was just like, I'd have to go to the piano and play the chord. Oh, that chord. And so that was a different type of communication. But Berkeley and New England Conservatory, we could speak in like 2 or 3 different languages.
Thank you so much. I want to move to our next segment, which is the anecdote segment, where you share an anecdote of your use of the NNS, whether it's a funny, awkward, or strange situation, perhaps, for all of us to learn from your anecdote. I shall begin with the very last person who contributed, and that was Ryan. Thank you, Ryan.
A funny anecdote about I have been in one shouting match with Professor over whether or not minor charts should be written from the perspective of 6 or 1. But I have also been, I better not say who it was. I don't think I will. But I was in a session for a pretty popular singer from a pretty popular family of singers out in the West, out in the Salt Lake City area where I am from, and my numbers chart got me about escorted from the studio because I had brought something that the other cats didn't expect and didn't want, and it's the only time in my life I've ever thrown. I was session leader on that one. I threw out a numbers chart. And it was the only time I've ever had a negative response from a bunch of session players who thought that it was
give us
like
some
I had
details. Could you give us the details, please?
No, because I like all these people, and I hope to work with them again soon.
So
I really do.
Were they dumbfounded and refused to adapt and said, well, you either give us something we expect or you're out of this picture, or were they...
They thought I was trying to go over their heads with some fancy chord talk that just wasn't. And I was trying to do the opposite. I was trying to, for me, the number system serves as the lowest common denominator. If I'm just going to put the song form with the basic chord structure and function in front of you, and then y'all just do your thing. Like, I'm not going to tell you how to do your job, but this is how the song goes. And I don't know where I went wrong, but when I slapped that paper down in front of everybody, they thought I was being all hoity-toity, and they about run me out.
Oh, we're sorry for your experience, but we're glad that you've moved on from that one. I think so.
I've recovered.
You did get the job done in the end, I suppose.
Yeah, it's all I had to do is, like PC just said, explain that my language and their language are the same language. Mm-hmm. I think if I had walked in with Roman numerals, they would have been fine. I couldn't tell if they thought I did the job halfway or was trying to get too fancy for them, but. Man, we're just there to make records, not make a point.
That's a good point you just made. Thanks, Ryan. You know, you mentioned to me in your email about having various dialects in NNS, and one of the examples you gave me was the use of footballs versus diamonds. I wonder if there are any other versions of this. Anyone aware of?
Neal said something today that makes me wonder if to this day I've got diamonds misinterpreted in my head. He's
think?
probably one of those guys that says channel instead of pre-chorus too. So I don't know if we could ever be friends.
No, everybody has their own nomenclature. I've found, some people write different charts. I mean, it's okay as long as everybody understands where they're going and what they're playing. So.
Speaking of reading charts and et cetera, Neal, I know you're a trained percussionist, and I have a question about drummers using NNS, and maybe the rest of you might have something to say about it as well. But I have read that drummers use NNS charts minus the chord indications because they get a general idea of the movement, the phrasing, the pushes, the stops, and tempo changes, and so on and so forth. And some even retain the chord indications because it gives them an idea of the phrasing or what's to come, because they can see very quickly, this is like a standard 1-5-4-1 kind of chord progression, and they know how it's going to go. Have you seen, Neal, or any one of you, the use of the NNS in such a manner? And if you have, might you have an anecdote to share, of course?
Yeah, when you get handed a chart, whether you're a drummer or whatever, it's usually in the Nashville Number System, and you just notate, like if you know what, like it's a shuffle or something like that, you just say shuffle up there, and then you can notate what, if they have kicks, where those are, and if you want to have a drum fill going into the chorus, you notate that, and that's basically it, and if you have to lay out, you notate that, but that'd probably be already, because some of the musicians will keep on playing through, the drums may lay out, or vice, whatever. So,
would you use the
yeah,
word
I've seen it.
fill in place of a fill, like what, instead of notating out the divisions of notes, would you just put the word fill if you've already indicated this is
You
a song?
can, if the, say, the artist or producer likes what you're doing, and sometimes they want a specific rhythm, and they'll tell you like dot 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 dot, whatever,
So
and
this is in
then that,
traditional notation?
yeah,
Okay.
basically you'll have, like quarter notes, eighth notes, and then you'll have a symbol, like percussionists use like little symbols with a note with an X on it for a symbol, symbol. And if you want it to be a crash, you put an accent over it, like that, to indicate that it's an accented crash or whatever. So that I see that a lot. And I want to tell you this anecdote. A lot of times I've brought a regular classically notated chart to someone, and they said, "Hey, I don't read this." And so, I said, "Okay, well, what do you do? What would you rather do?" And they say, "Well, I do read the Nashville Number System." I said, "Well, okay. If you want to chart it out with the Nashville Number System, go ahead and do that." And then they'll do that. And then, so I've seen it the other way around, where somebody got offended because I, put notation up there, so that they didn't read notation, and that's fine. Like I said, as long as people know what they're supposed to play, and they can use that as their framework, that's the most important thing. So, so everybody can play together. So.
Thanks, Neal. Gary, would you have an anecdote that might be funny, awkward, strange?
Well, we'll see if it's funny or not, I guess.
Okay.
It was a session in Nashville, and this same thing has actually happened a couple of times, where a lot of New York and LA session players have moved to Nashville. And before they moved to Nashville, they were not familiar with the Nashville Number System. And so they you know, they've already played on hit records wherever they're from, and they sit down on their first Nashville session, they see a bunch of numbers, and it's like, what's this? You know, they didn't really know. I mean, they picked it up quick enough, but thing about it is, and some people kind of, New York and LA people, every now and then you'll find somebody that looks at a Nashville number chart and says, oh, this is just hillbilly stuff, you know. This is just for songs that are just real simple 1, 4, 5 songs. But anyway, on this particular session, it was a bass player, and you know, the bass players pretty much got to know the chords. So anyway, so he kind of rewrote his chart or talked to the keyboard player, and he wrote out something. Anyway, so the singer gets there, and it's a female singer, and she's having problems with her voice that day. She's not recording yet, but she's singing along with the track. She's in the control room, and she's going, I know I can usually sing that song in that key, but today I can't. And so everybody's, okay, we got a number chart. It doesn't matter. Do it in whatever key you want to. And the one guy that rewrote his chart, now he's got to transpose everything. And so he's kind of behind a little bit. Everybody else is just, okay, let's go. Doesn't matter what key it's in. So they quickly saw the value of the Nashville number system. That's one of the main advantages of it. And sometimes you'll do the track and the singer will be there, and somebody, the producer or even one of the musicians will say, you know, to the singer, you're really straining to hit that, you know, that A440. You know, if we did it a step lower, you wouldn't have to, you know, hurt yourself to hit that note, and then just go out there and do it in a step lower. So it happens. Sometimes it's the singer that wants to change the key, and sometimes it's the producer that wants to change the key. You know, it could. So it does happen, and I've seen that happen a couple of times.
Happens all the time.
One of the players weren't that familiar with the number system and quickly saw the value of it.
Thanks, Gary. PC, do you have an anecdote you'd like to share?
I was just trying to think of one, but back in the days of analog tape, we were switching songs, and we had a guitar player, and he's like, what's going on with the song? So we're writing the song out and doing the numbering system. It's about a 7-minute song, and we're like notating the whole song out for him. I think we might have had a cassette. We might have played it for him once or something like that. And then the tape was finally ready, and he starts rolling. So we had this piece of paper on the stand, and about a minute and a half into the session, the piece of paper falls off the stand. He wasn't reading it anyway, because he heard the song one time in the cassette and kind of had memorized the song. So just to guide him along, I'm like doing this, you know, and just standing in front of him going, you know, like this with my hands. And it was a one take, and it was a great pass. And he basically knew the song by ear after hearing it one time. But we did go to the convenience of writing out the number system for him.
Well, yeah, I do know people like that who have a good memory.
I used to have a really good memory when I was young, but I'm not young anymore.
Well, I don't know what to say, PC. But you look great.
Thanks.
Thanks, PC. Tim, would you have an anecdote?
Yeah. I remember once I was on a session, and Chaz Williams was on the session, the fellow that wrote the Nashville Number System. And he was one of 2 people on the session that had to rewrite the chart in another key. They heard it differently. And I was trying to remember what it could have been, but it could have been something where some people heard it as 1 flat 7 4, and other people heard it as 5 4 1.
Sweet Home Alabama.
Say that again.
Sweet Home Alabama is one of those songs.
There you go. Exactly. Which is it? So it's kind of interesting, but I thought it was pretty funny when the guy who wrote the Nashville Number System was there, and he rewrote it. But I was going to also tell one other thing is that the players in the Nashville string sections here, the people that are hired to play whatever you put in front of them, because keys sometimes change, they can actually transpose and read the music and transpose it half or one step away from it flawlessly. They have just learned because it happens, and they're professionals, and so you learn, hey, that's something I'm kind of called to do, and they do it. So it's
Right.
pretty, just like I used to be able to play in the key A flat and B flat. I used to play everything in every key when I was doing that stuff, I'll tell you.
Yeah, I have to say I have great respect for the Nashville Symphony. Not because I live in Nashville, but because they're one of the best orchestras I've ever heard. Hold on, there's a plane flying over me. Did you hear the noise? No?
Yeah.
So I have a final question and a couple of extras before we say thank you very much to everybody, because we're getting there and I'm sure it's very late, time to go to bed for everyone. But the question is about education, and this has been an interesting exploration of a system of notation that's widely employed and its evolution through the necessities of use. So Ryan and PC, you're both professors at separate university, of course. Ryan, you're a clinical professor at Purdue University, and PC, you're a lecturer at Berklee College of Music. I would like to hear what you think about the National Number System as part of modern music curriculum. I hear from you, Ryan, that it's already being taught at Purdue. Is it part of the curriculum?
It is. We approach it at Purdue as the place where our traditional conservatory education connects to our commercial music students who want to go out and make a living at this. Like I said, they'll come into class complaining about music theory and aural skills as classes they have to take, and we just have to shake them and say, no, it's the same thing and you need it. You cannot disregard music theory because you don't like the word subdominant. It's the four chord. And once they put these things together, they realize we're all working together to do the same thing, to give them the same education. They can go put to work in any genre they want. It's starting to work. They're starting to take their conservatory education more seriously, and they're starting to apply those deeper theory skills to their pop and rock.
Thanks, Ryan. PC, is NNS a part of the curriculum at Berklee?
In some classes, it might be called NNS. But the idea of it is definitely throughout the entire Berklee curriculum. I just don't think it's called the Nashville Number System. We just call it music, and you have to know your chord progressions and the spacing between the chords and all that. So we actually begin with the whole Ionian approach and then the tonic approach, and eventually you know that they're tied to numbers. And if that's called the Nashville System, then we have it all throughout Berklee. The bigger question that we have at Berklee is a career post Berklee is there was a certain percentage of the Berklee musicians that are excellent musicians. They're being discovered like round the corner, but that's a very small percentage. The bulk of those students are having to contend with music that is becoming less about the player and more about the brand, more about the how this person identifies with their music, more so than whether they can play an instrument or not. And I personally don't want my musicians to think that they can't compete with that. that they have to get gigs standing behind people that know less than them. And that's a more difficult thing that's happening in our industry than one might think. You know, there are people who are hiring brilliant musicians that have no idea what a minor chord is or a major chord is. And my preference would be that our musicians are the ones that are the marquee items and the marquee draw. But, you know, that has a lot to do with educating the public about what music is and their appreciation of music. I'm not saying that you have to be a classically trained musician, but this idea of picking up a guitar and actually manipulating it, or playing the piano and manipulating it, in many ways, because I'm looking at pop music, that skill is so uncool in 2025. You're a nerd if you can play well. And it just freaks me out.
It's kind of the grunge ethic.
Yeah.
I'm back.
Oh man. Yeah.
Anyone else with thoughts on what PC and Ryan have just introduced?
Here's one thing. I teach guitar a lot when I'm not playing. The whole idea that music, and this really goes for music, playing a musical instrument, singing, dancing, things like that, that you have to have some kind of special talent, that it's only for these specially talented people. But I want to get across the idea that it's for everybody. Anybody can learn how to play an instrument or sing or dance. You know, if you have a basic sense of rhythm, which everybody has, some people are more developed than others. If you have a sense of pitch, everybody has that. It's just developing those things, your sense of rhythm and sense of pitch. Anybody can sing or play or dance or whatever. And I just hate to think of all these people sitting on the sidelines going, oh, I wish I was talented. You know, I can't do that. But they can do that.
I agree.
Anybody else with some thoughts about the matter of enjoying music, generally speaking, or an education in music? No?
And enjoying music is enjoying music, and enjoying the evolution of music is something that I believe in. And I you know, audiences change. Like what a 12-year-old kid likes is not necessarily going to be what I like. But I kind of understand why the 12-year-old kid likes what they like. I don't know if I should be trying to do it, but I understand it. And I think that the day that I do not understand why that 12-year-old kid likes something that just makes no sense to me, and that I have but as long as I maintain my curiosity about it, then I'll be able to have that conversation with the 12-year-old kid. And then once I lose my curiosity about the thing that I don't understand, I don't need to be, I feel like I don't need to be teaching anymore, you know, and that curiosity is what keeps me vibrant in the classroom and connecting with my students.
That's quite profound.
You know, I always admired Quincy Jones because even though he kept aging and get really old, he would still be going out at night to the clubs.
Yeah.
He's 80 years old, going out to the clubs, listening to the music that the 18-year-olds did. And I have to say, the lifestyle of that, I really can't do anymore. And that has closed, truly. And that has closed because what I always say is, I now get up at the time when I went to bed for decades. I get up at 4 or 5 in the morning.
This is it.
I just do.
Quincy's book is on my nightstand right now, and it's a good read. There's a lot of wisdom in that guy.
There you go.
That's the one. That's exactly the one. That cracks me up. No, I mean, PC, that just drives the point somebody just put on YouTube that this meeting is like the musical equivalent of finding world peace. And I just want to say that how great it is to meet the five of you, and just realize we're all out there enjoying the same thing. That line about curiosity is a line I use in my classroom. And the idea that we can read and write these different dialects of any type of music we want, and appreciate each other's take on it, man, that's just I'm getting emotional here, so forgive me, but
Yeah.
but
Likewise.
that's why I'm still doing this all these years later, since a 12-year-old with a banjo is now, I'm in my mid 40s, and I don't want to stop to go back to where you guys started with retirement. Like, I guess I'll retire when music's not fun anymore, but I don't see that coming.
Absolutely. I've really greatly enjoyed having you guys on this live stream, and you've behaved yourselves very well. Thank you very much. And I believe we have learned a lot from each other as well. And I really appreciate that you've been able to talk on the Nashville Number System and somewhat resolve some of the questions I've had, and in fact, resolve some of the questions each of you have had about certain issues, because you have looked at the NNS from your own journey to its discovery, from where you were as whether you're trained or not trained, playing this style or that style in this part of America or that part of the States. And we've come together to put at least some interesting facts about the NNS in one little virtual bowl so we can dip from it. As I said, this live stream will be archived, so if we are interested in what we had said today but we've forgotten the specifics, it's there for you to reference. I do hope I can get you guys back together again one day to talk on another topic, if you're so inclined. And I know I've kept you a bit longer, but I didn't see anyone showing signs of exhaustion or fatigue, so I didn't say. I think we need to, just end this live stream now. Everyone's been so energetic, but I don't want to take up more of your time because I know it's bedtime, like I said. I want to thank you, Gary, Neal, Tim, PC. Thanks for allowing me to call you PC, by the way. And Ryan, we've totally and utterly enjoyed, my viewers and I, having you on the live stream, and hope you had a fun time too. We wish you exciting projects ahead, and of course, to stay safe and well. And here's my virtual applause for everyone.
To everyone too.
Thank you.
So I'm going to, unless you have any final words, I shall go to the outro theme, but you guys stay there and I'll say goodbye to you properly when the outro is over. Do you have any final words for our viewers out there?
Thank you.
No, just keep on
It's fun.
keep on learning and listening.
All right, thank you everyone. Outro's coming up, but viewers, you have been awesome too, and please like this episode if you've enjoyed it, and subscribe to be alerted to my next broadcast. Have a great and safe week, and I'll see you soon. And here's another round of applause for our guests. They have been beyond awesome. What can I say? Okay, I'll see you guys soon. Here's the outro, guys. Thanks for joining us. Bye.